Hello. Once again, it's a pleasure to welcome you to join me in walking with God in the garden. Some people have asked me, what is this room that I'm using to do this recording in? Actually, it's my study. In the background are many of my books, and I'm happy to report that in doing a research on the biblical plants of the Bible, that I have many, many books that I've accumulated over the years to gather the specimens that are talked about in the Bible. Actually, I had a biblical garden with a church that I used to pastor in Escondido, and many of those plants are still there. If any of you are interested in knowing what plants are biblical plants and are still in the garden, I'd be more than happy to share that with you. I also would appreciate very much if you are a regular user of this program to let me know what you think of it. Is it helping? Is there something more that I can do? Should I change perhaps the approach? My style is to take a text from the Bible and to expand on it, to try to make it relevant for your life and my life as well. I was discussing the classes that I teach with someone today, and I was telling the person that oftentimes I am the great benefactor because I have always many questions that I like to ask and also to pursue something that is greater than just the subject before us. That brings me into focus today with a subject that I have for you, and it is walking with God's staff. Before we get to that, though, I have a question, and it's a question that I have about Adam in the Garden of Eden. Have you ever wondered why it seemed to be so easy for Adam and Eve to yield to temptation? We'd like to think of the Garden of Eden as being a perfect place. No wrong, no ill thinking, and no temptation. But the temptation was there, and it seemed to be overwhelming for Adam and for Eve. When they ate of the forbidden fruit, it cast all of us into a world of dilemma, a world that now is our responsibility to try to make it right. To make it right is a monumental task. There are many things out there that need correcting. And if you're aware of some of the issues that are in our society today, you can sense how desperate this world is to be corrected. Whether it's homelessness, crime, juvenile delinquency, drugs, alcoholism, spousal abuse, I can go on and on and on in terms of the list of problems that we have in our world. We've been talking about Moses, and I'd like to add and continue that theme with you today. Moses was called by God to deliver the people of Israel out of slavery. They'd been in Egypt for 430 years, and they cried unto God. God heard their cry, and he raised up Moses to be their deliverer. Moses is an interesting person. He was a person who did not want to do what God wanted him to do. He had many excuses, and one of them was he couldn't talk. I suspect that maybe Moses was a stutterer, and whenever he tried to talk, he got into trouble, trying to make sense for those who were listening to him. This was a plague in Moses' life, and he felt that it was an encumbrance, something that would prevent him from fulfilling what God had called him to do. You ever felt that way about maybe some of the things that are going on in your world, and you feel some compulsion to try to help, to lift that burden, to again rectify the wrongs that occurred in the Garden of Eden? that really, in essence, is something we all have to live with. Do we have the ability to cope and to truly do what we need to do? There are many people who feel they're incapable. They just don't have the skill. It's not just using their voice, but it's their abilities. Their minds just can't comprehend the depth of the problem. So they go on their merry way. Moses could not do that. We've learned that God confronted him. And one day Moses said, how am I going to convince Pharaoh, who is the leader of the Egyptians, that you sent me and that I have the ability to lead the people out of Egypt? Moses had a stick in his hand, and this is the curious kind of a thing. And God said, Moses, throw it on the ground. Moses threw the stick on the ground, and it became a snake. Moses became alarmed. He fled from it, and God said, pick it up. Moses reaches forth, picks it up, and it becomes, again, a stick. That stick becomes an object in Moses' life. Just like sometimes maybe in our lives we need help to walk. I was observing an elderly gentleman yesterday who was in a position of where he needed help. He had a cane. That cane became his stick, his staff of support. Maybe you feel you need something like that in your life as you face the world of need that is out there. And let me just share again some of those needs that we all have. There are needs that have to be dealt with that is filled with stress and anger. I was on an airplane yesterday flying from Alaska to California, and I could tell there were irritations. People were not always kind to the flight attendants. They balked at wearing a mask. They were upset. But that was the requirement. No compromise. And they said very clearly, if you do not like the rules on this plane, you can get off right now. So there was a real need, a need to be patient, to be kind, to be loving, to be considerate, and to be helpful. Friends, that's the world we live in today. And what do we have to meet that world? Our garden is filled with all kinds of problems that need to be corrected. Now, Adam and Eve did not have this help. I'm amazed at the fact that they responded the way they did by yielding to temptation. But we don't have to do that. We also have what we call the staff of God. So I share it with you today, and I read the passage from the book of Exodus. It's a passage that speaks about Moses. The Lord said to Moses, "Go back to Egypt, for all the men who wanted to kill you are dead." So Moses took his wife and son, and he put them on a donkey and started back to Egypt. And he took the staff of God in his hand. The staff of God. We have a staff that God has given to us. In Psalm 23, it says, "As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will be comforted. Your rod and your staff are there to help me." God's staff is his word, sharper than any two-edged sword. God's staff is prayer. Prayer changes things. It is our way to God himself. We have a staff called the Holy Spirit, who guides us and directs us and inspires us. And all we have to do is to take that staff into our lives and seek in prayer the way of the Spirit. And I think one thing that we don't oftentimes use, but we should, and that is fellowship, God's community. When Jesus was on the earth, he had his disciples. And in his time of greatest need, he took his disciples to pray with him. They didn't succeed entirely, but they knew what he wanted. Friends, today, as you go through your garden, making corrections, improvements, getting rid of the things that are disturbing and troubling and are so afflicting in the lives of so many people, take the staff of God in your hand and carry it with you like a person would a cane so that you don't fall and stumble, but rather have that staff there to help you in your time of need. God bless you, friends. It's been wonderful to have you today. Please let me know how this program fits into your life.